There has been a surge in demand for smart sensors to be installed in our buildings for upkeeping hygiene and keeping track in case of virus contagion. But how do we know that our data is not being used for our disadvantage? Hi, this is Takatoshi Shibayama, the host of the Future Design Podcast. In this episode, I have Tim Panagos, CTO of Microshare, who's been developing smart sensors for buildings for contract tracing and predictive cleaning. He talks to us about how data collected should not be owned by the collector, but transparent to all parties included. The less we become faceless data, the more we can take back our ownership of data and understand ourselves better. This is a big U-turn from where we are heading. So stick around to the end. Before we continue, I'd just like to say the encouragement from viewers like you keeps me creating more content. It'll mean so much to me if you can share the episodes with your friends and family if you thought it was useful. Let me know in the comment section if you think IoT is heading towards a dystopian or a utopian society. Alright now, please enjoy this week's show. Well, thank you very much, Tim, to be joining our Future Design Podcast. In the past, I had 3 episodes, really in the beginning about we had 3 gentlemen, 2 from the Future Cities Laboratory, which is a joint venture between a university in Switzerland called ETH Zurich and the National University of Singapore. And we had conversations around smart grids and smart cities in general, transportation included. And then we also had a gentleman from JLL talk about smart buildings. And now that we have you on board, it creates a more depth about talking about smart cities, smart buildings, IoT in general. So I'm really happy for you to be on our show.
Oh, it's a pleasure to talk to you, Takatoshi. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And so let me throw out this question in the beginning. So Tim, you are a guy who is working in the IoT space. Can I ask you, who is Tim that's doing things in IoT?
Who's me? That's a deep question. I am fundamentally a tinkerer, and one of my old mentors would have called me a dilettante because I really like to dabble in a lot of different areas, intellectually. So I spend a lot of time thinking about technology. Obviously, that's my core job, but I spend a lot of time talking about philosophy and politics, and I use those sort of entry points to inform what I'm doing as an entrepreneur as well. And so, I guess I've never really decided what I wanted to be when I grew up, and still kind of on that search.
Yeah, likewise, actually. I'm already in my 40s. I'm still thinking, what am I doing? It's just always like a fundamental question that I ask myself. But you still got into the world of IoT, and this is kind of something that you're very passionate about. Let me ask you, why IoT? In this world, we see a lot of emerging technologies coming out. Obviously, I don't need to even say, but like IoT is definitely one of them. AI, blockchain, all these things are coming together at this interesting around this time. What made you think about, I want to go into IoT?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you said, there is a lot of convergence of technologies that I think all of a sudden makes something special possible. And IoT is a particular block, but as you mentioned, blockchain and AI and cloud technology and network speeds and processing power on the edge, all of these trends right now are coming together to make something truly unique possible in the history of our species. And so I would say I don't even necessarily think of my company as an IoT company per se, although it's probably the right single hook to grab a hold of, because it's really about bringing all those things together. Really, it's about harnessing the power of data to manage our world more efficiently. And to me, what's really important about that, and maybe it's not controversial anymore, is that human intuition only extends so far into large scale consideration, right? We've still got these monkey brains holding us back. And so it seems to me that really being able to receive good information about the world around us will allow us to make better decisions that maximize our resources, minimizes our ecological impact, and maximizes the well-being of the human beings and indeed of everything that lives in the ecosystem. So to me, that is philosophically very important. And I think it's the power of data that will allow us to transcend our sort of limited evolutionary perspectives to be able to do better and better at managing our world as good custodians.
Mm. And I always believe that technology is there to augment us and not really take over us. And a lot of the technology that we see today can be put into different the buckets. I mean, a lot of people in our technology like to be more tech utopian in a way that all these technologies that we're bringing about in this world can lead us to a much better future. But at the same time, it is a double-edged sword, and it really depends on us how we use that technology. I like to use, like, let's say, because I'm was deeply in the blockchain world, and I see something like a central bank digital currency where I guess Bitcoin was created to decentralize money. We wanted to have a money that's more democratized and we have control over money. But then if it becomes a central bank digital currency, it completely defeats that purpose. So in a way that IoT can also be, in a way, something similar as well. One can say that we can manage our data very well. We can monitor many different things, whether it be smart grids, transportation, or what you're working on, as well as diseases, how we can better detect people who have contagious diseases and how that can spread. But at the same time, it could be used for surveillance capital or surveillance nations as well. So how do we really go about preventing ourselves from falling into that dystopian future?
Yeah, I think that's the perfect angle because I think, when we started the company, the real baseline of what we're doing, my company's called Microshare. Microshare doesn't say anything about IoT. It doesn't say anything about smart buildings. It doesn't say anything about employee engagement. That's what we do on a daily basis. But the underlying technology, in fact, our patent pending approach to things, something that we do that's quite different is we built a data management paradigm at the base that recognizes that data must be thought of as being owned by more than one person simultaneously. And so I think the sort of whole big brother idea about surveillance state and IoT data and even online data is is really rooted in this like old school IT assumption that if I own the device and I own the network, then I own the database and then I own the stuff in it. And that is a single owner stovepipe. But that's really not the way digital information behaves. And in a moral, legal, contractual perspective, it doesn't match reality. But that's the way that technology has always been thought of. So we said, look, that can't be what it's like to be the participant in a data ecosystem anymore. We have to recognize that, yeah, sure, the owner of the device, the owner of the network, and the owner of the database, what we'd like to call the first receiver in IoT, right? Of course, they have an ownership stake, but they're not the only ones. We need to recognize, particularly, let's talk about a building, right, where we do a lot of the magic in the built space generically. But if you take a building, let's just take a typical office building. Um, the office building obviously lives in a jurisdiction, right? It might be in Singapore, so the Singaporean government has some jurisdiction over the area in which the building lives. There'll be a building owner, and they may own just the physical plant. The building is often managed by another company that does the facilities management. Um, each floor might be rented out by a different tenant company. That tenant company then has employees and customers who transit the space to use it for their daily activities. If I'm measuring details about that physical space, then I have to recognize that every one of those entities has some viable ownership stake in the information that I'm collecting. And what I have to do to be less dystopian about this is provide what I think of as radical visibility, right? Radical transparency about that information, to recognize that a piece of information is about Takatoshi, and then give you the tools to see the data, see in real time what's happening with it, and then give you the knobs and dials so that you can express your individual policy about what that data should be used for and what it shouldn't be used for. And I think that concept of recognizing individuals' private data policies, doing it at real time, doing it at high speed, so that we can keep doing these AI data-driven goals that I think are really important to society, but still respect the individual rights that I think must come along with that ownership contract.
We discussed digital twins before in our previous episode, and what we were explained was that, if you have a digital twin, it's not really attached to a particular identity. It doesn't say Takatoshi, it doesn't say Tim, it doesn't say your address, your age, or anything like that. So it can really be a twin that's completely mirrored who you are, but not exactly what you are. And this is something that gives people a little bit of comfort that, okay, so there is no identity attached to this. But thing is, you can say that, but like, who knows, right? And that's the thing that really worries us, is that yes, this whole IoT system where a lot of gadgets are connected, you have all these cameras looking at us, but are they actually really doing what they're telling us that they're doing? Yes. I mean, I understand that if it's a private corporation, maybe they have to disclose certain things, or they're accountable to the government. Although time and time again, we don't see that accountability many times, but if it falls into, let's say, the government's hands, and they decide that, okay, we're going to hack this and try to track this person because we really need to find this person because of they did this, or they have a political opinion about certain things and we want to track it down. I mean, that's what I really worry about, is that, on the surface, people do say it's all there's it's safe and it's all that, right? But I mean, who knows? That's what I worry about.
I think you're right on to worry about that. I think we talk about digital twinning as well, and I think beyond IoT, digital twinning really is the promise of the accumulation of these technologies that we were talking about earlier. So I think it's a good phrase to kind of capture what we're up to there. And the value of the digital twin, obviously, is being able to make large scale, high speed, rational decisions about a very complex system quickly, consistently, etc. Which again, individual humans aren't that great at doing on their own, not with large scale systems. So there's a great promise to digital twin, but this idea of anonymity as driving human safety or human rights relative to data, I think I think it's a ruse. Honestly, I think that any data scientist will tell you that de-anonymizing this kind of information is relatively trivial, and I think, as you pointed out there, often it's not even necessary to actually de-anonymize it, because your name is kind of a crude hook to what it is your identity is. Your digital twin is actually a much higher resolution picture of who you are than your name actually represents, right? So, but again, I think that's the difference between the system thinking and the human thinking, because we tend to think of our name and maybe our phone number and our address as being, solid hooks about our identity. And as long as you don't know that, we feel safe. But actually, that's not really the system's view of the world. It actually doesn't care about that thing. So if you think about collapsing your identity into a name, that's a very compressed digital representation of you, and the system doesn't need that. It has the full, 10, 20 gigabyte view of who Takatoshi and Tim Panagos is. And so it's irrelevant that the name is not necessarily attached to it. And so I think my personal view is that we need to go radically in another direction, that we can't count on pseudo-anonymity. I have a hard time saying that word even, right? We can't count on that to protect our individual rights relative to these technologies. It's really just a stopgap, as you said, to give people some immediate comfort. But I think that people are waking up to this idea that it's not enough. My worry is that we're going to get lagging governmental regulation that will be out of step with the actual current technology, current societal need. And we're going to squash the use of data to make our lives better, because I really do think there's a massive societal good here, both for individuals, because I'm fundamentally a libertarian. I believe in the sanctity of individual human right. But at the same time, I can see the real value, as you said, that, the tech euphoria perhaps of what's possible when you're data driven. And we got to stop wrecking the planet. We got to increase human well-being. We got to distribute wealth in practical ways and much better ways. How are we going to do that without data, man? So if we keep using regulation to squash this idea of data driven, we'll either hamper our ability to address real problems that we're facing today, or we're going to cause these incentives for people to do things in secret, which I think is even worse, right? Because that you can't put the genie back in the bottle. People are being data driven. They're not going to stop being data driven just because there's a GDPR, or it's not going to stop that. It'll drive it underground. And I think that's the real source of risk for us all, is when it's secret, because that's where stuff happens, right? It's in the light that these potential dystopian items can be explored, can be called out, can be culled, can be shamed. Right? Humans react really well to shame, and if we keep things behind closed doors, I think that's the wrong angle.
Just going back to the whole Bitcoin thing, but initially everybody thought that Bitcoin, because you have these hash addresses and you have no idea who the identity or which bank account or any of these things. But now everybody can find out who you exactly are. And what I also think about this smart cities and things is that even though there's no name or anything attached to it, if you can track the activity patterns, let's say you go from a particular house or a particular residential address to a particular building, and you stay there for several hours, you kind of know more or less where that or who that person is, because if you look into the records of that company and say, okay, this guy works there, and all that. I mean, you could really find it in the end, right? So, and as you said, GDPR and any of this is just designed by the government. I mean, it could be switched off in a flick of a button, and so that's maybe I'm just kind of continue the conversation without any end of this particular topic, but it just seems that we're just going down and down to this rabbit hole of yes, we love data, we need to mine all these data, and it's going to make us money and make us our lives better, but what is the trade-off, right? And are we really trading off more than we're actually getting? And it's a very difficult line to actually see, because we have no idea. I mean, it's beyond our kind of imagination at this point what that can do for us, or to us.
Absolutely right. And I think I liken our current stance relative to these is sort of like a 6-year-old playing hide and seek and peeking through their closed hands on their face, and thinking that they're hidden. And I think eventually you grow up and realize, what was I thinking, right?
Yeah.
I'm not invisible at all. And I think that's our current stance. But we're also young as a society, right? This is young technology. This is young societal thinking, and humans are just not built evolutionarily to really completely understand what the world of data at scale implies. So I think we're sorting things out culturally. I do hope we'll go in the right direction, but what I'm advocating, I think, is for organizations to take exactly the opposite stance and say, it's not that I don't want to know who my users are. In fact, I want to know exactly who they are. And the reason I want to do that is so that I can give them back the rights to their own data, and not pretend that I can't know, or that it doesn't matter that I don't know their names. I want to go the other way and say, in order to ascribe this digital twin to the proper person, to you, Takatoshi, in order to do that, I have to take that extra step, stop pretending I don't actually know who you are. Because once I know who you are and I can attach you to that twin, I can then say, Takatoshi in real world, how should this twin move through the digital world, right? What rights should it have? What attitudes should it have? And then you can witness its usage. You can witness its abuse. You can witness its power. And I think that gives you the opportunity to participate in the economic benefit of data generation, right? Which is another like really important conversation that we're having globally. You know, how if we do see this technology coming together and we are going to automate more work, how do we distribute income? How do we recognize participation? And I think, you know, the basis of something like UBI, for instance, has to be around recognizing the fundamental economic value of ourselves as data consumers, data producers, and material participants in that ecosystem. If I know who you are and I can see you clearly as a digital twin, one of the things you could tell me is, you want to use anything about my digital twin? It's 10 cents a gigabyte, and then we can have a transaction, or a thousand satoshis per gigabyte, whatever ends up being that nominal rate of return, mechanism of return, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's a radically different approach. It takes us in the other direction. Instead of running away from identity, I think we need to run towards it, because there's nothing more human than that. And I think when you separate the human face from the digital twin, I think it makes it more likely that other humans are going to abuse it, because it's dehumanizing, right? And at the end of the day, as we live more and more of our lives in a blend of physical and digital, our digital twin isn't really a separate thing anymore, right? More and more, it becomes really, it's a limb. It's not a phantom. It becomes really real. And I think you see the debate about online behaviors right now um, firing up, because I think people are building that intuition that this isn't something else. It is me. And man, having been working in IoT and looking at measurement of the real space, I don't think people have really caught on quite yet to that on a mainstream way. But what we can know about people from a physical space, I think, should intimidate us way more than what people can know about you just from a digital behavior space. It's really unification of those two things that digital twin is near perfect in my mind.
Hmm. And a lot of the talked about pros of this smart cities and smart buildings is that we can predict, well, the prediction models on top of that, because we want to use it for disaster management. And let's say, a contagious disease was spread around here, that digital twin needs to act a certain way. But if it's just taking data that what we're doing on an everyday basis, it wouldn't really be able to predict how I'm going to react when there is a certain kind of disease that was spreading. Am I going to run, towards A, or am I going to run towards B? Am I going to fly away? I mean, those things, that data is really necessary. And to make that prediction model more and more accurate, you need more data from my digital twin. And then to understand who I really am, you need to really dig into various different information sources to really make an accurate prediction of who that pseudo-anonymous person is going to be. So how do you go about doing that? Because how does that system coexist with us being able to secure our privacy?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We're doing a lot of work, probably not surprisingly, with COVID response right now, because in the whole world, including the world of built spaces, this is the major driving force, right? That we're all worried about. How do we get people back into economically productive positions, which in many cases involves a built physical space, and how do we balance their well-being? And I don't think this is anything new. That's the way I've always thought about our mission in the smart building space. Many people think, well, it's short term. It's about saving money. We can cut energy costs or whatever. But at the end of the day, what it really is, it's about maximizing the impact of human productivity in the space in many ways, right? So it's access to assets. So can I use this machine? It's access to collaboration. So can I get the right people together in a good environment to exchange information and innovate? And that we count on our physical spaces to provide the backdrop for that effective collaboration with machine and human and mixes therein, right? And so when you bring in something that makes well-being, not just comfort, right? And I feel like I good oxygen in the room, and the temperature is nice so that we can get into the conversation, use the whiteboard effectively. Now it's, am I at risk of infecting myself, my friends, and my family with potentially deadly disease? So it has taken that obviously up a notch. But the angle there is also, as you said, in order to get better and better at addressing that issue, we need to have higher resolution information about you. And for those who don't have a good sense of that, AI just famously does better as you add more features, they call it. And if you know what a spreadsheet looks like, then it likes to have lots of columns on the spreadsheet. Right? The more columns, the more information, and you almost can't overwhelm machine learning with the number of columns the way I can be overwhelmed by a spreadsheet. But so those are the number of features, and to put it simply, it's like more pixels in a picture. Right? If I got a blurry image taken from an old camera, then I can't really see the sharp edges of a face or a tree or the leaves. But the higher resolution, the more features I get, the more pixels I pack in, the more clear, defined that picture becomes, right? So it's the same with the digital twin, right? The more features, the more types of data we can bring together, the crisper that image becomes. And so, as you say, that's the driver in the AI world, is really to get that highest resolution information so that we can do better things with them, make better predictions, and get more value out of it. But the heart of your question really then is, can we trust that, right? And the more I give you, obviously, the less I have in reserve, right? The more resolution you have, yes, you might be looking at the positive side of me, but don't you also see the negative side, the side that I might not want you to see? And of course, that's true. The place I think this gets really more intuitively problematic for humans, certainly for me, is it's not the seeing me clearly that I worry about. It's the you, big brother, trying to influence my behavior without my knowledge. I think at the end of the day, it's using those knobs and dials to make me do things. Again, exploiting holes in my monkey brain, to buy more stuff, or to be a better citizen, or comply with this law or that law. That to me feels like where the real worry is. So if the picture is more acceptable to me because I have more light shined into that dark corner, I have more visibility, more control, that's one thing. And then I think the other radical idea around this is, don't also be using this data to try to manipulate me, because I think we react quite negatively to that, and probably correctly. Because that is something you'd never know whether you're doing it for my good and or for my bad. And the line between those things is pretty blurry in a lot of cases. If you look at the Venn diagram of that, what I would say is, no, it's not for the system to change the behavior of the individuals. What we ought to be doing is flipping that script as well and saying, I want you to change your own behavior in accordance with your own moral, philosophical, and well-being needs. In order to do that, what I ought to be doing is putting the data back into your hands. So yes, I have to collect it, centralize it, process it, because you don't want straight feeds of raw data from sensors and stuff. You don't have the resources to make sense of it. I don't have the resources to make sense of it. I need to do something with it, but then I should be putting it back in your hands. So to make that concrete, with COVID, instead of the employer, instead of the government, mandating social distancing, tracking how often you're spending time, and looking at, the individuals you're spending time with, and trying to manipulate your behavior. Yeah, that might be done for a good reason. They're trying to keep you and your family healthy. But what if instead of them doing it, I put the power back into your hands, Takatoshi, so you can see, presumably you care about your friends and family, right? I don't need the company to do that for me. Arm me with the information necessary to make better decisions. Let me change my behavior. And yes, have the organization there to back us up, to help us with that, maybe recommend best practices. But ultimately, I think that's where, empowering people with this information, that's the antidote to this big brothery behavioral modification creepiness that I think is at the heart of that dystopian problem.
Yeah, because the more these sensors and when we're talking about social media in general, they always say that they actually know more about you than you actually know about yourself. And if you flip that around, that means that it can actually teach you who exactly your certain personality is a lot more than you actually think, because a lot of things you're doing it on a subconscious level and you don't actually really know what you're really doing. So if they can tell you, okay, so if there's some certain, let's say, a contagious disease that happens, and your likelihood of reacting a certain way can actually get you, a disease more than you actually think that you're preventing yourself from, then I want to know that too. Right. And then I think that at the same time, the employer or the building or the city or whoever is looking at my data, it can say, okay, well, there's all these type of people who can, move in certain ways. So let me use that data to really predict well how that the city is gonna move at the same time. But again, I always go back. The more they know about me, I mean, it could be the flip side again. So it always goes into this conundrum of like, is that good for me, or is that better for me? And I always think about ultimately, how is this 10x better than what my life is right now? And right now, since we're timely in this COVID situation, everybody was in this quarantine for a long time, and this is an antiquated method that was used during the Spanish flu as well, quarantine, and it destroys jobs, destroys families, and all these things. And having a better system that doesn't do this obviously is much better system than a quarantine. But at the same time, we're giving ourselves away at the same time as well, right? So I think we really need to dig deeper into what are moral values that is constructed. What is the moral value of the government, more of the organizations that are bringing this technology out? And before we started recording, you were telling me that you're a deadhead and you love these, and you're talking about monkey mind. So I can kind of start to understand where your kind of spirituality is, and how you are engaging in this technology. But not a lot of people think like and that's also the concern that I think everybody has. And and through our different podcast episodes that I had, I tried to discuss about what is a unifying moral that we can go about leading a world with. This so many technologies that are coming about that can really 10x our lives or make it 10x worse. And this is something that I do want to keep talking about, and I love talking to you about this as well. But I don't want to waste your time all just going about this all the time. But let's talk about your business as well, Microshare. And you said that when I looked at your web page, it talks about the smart sensors and all these devices that you use for better detection of diseases within buildings. And I really find that that is something that's definitely 10x better than what the buildings that we have at the moment. I mean, it's much better than having nicer air, or small little improvements here and there. I mean, that's not something to give away my privacy for. But if they can detect something that I can actually die from, obviously that's something that I can give away my privacy from. So could you explain a little bit more about what Microshare does and what's its mission?
Sure. Well, in business, we call that a compelling event, right? The reason why people will all of a sudden open their minds a little bit and think about making a decision that's not the status quo. And I think you said it exactly right. People by default just think of this as, well, it's kind of trivial. Could I really do better on my energy savings? Am I really worried about whether Johnny in accounting, whether his desk is too cold or not? This is really my problem. And you think, well, that's for another day, right? Oh, why spend money on that? But then the compelling event comes along, and you realize that actually, again, if we have a higher resolution picture of the built space and how people interact within it, the perhaps the highest, most clear value that we can give to the participants is protecting their safety. And as has been made clear by a lot of our customers, they aren't the users of our technology aren't really even thinking of their own safety. They're thinking about the safety of their coworkers, their friends, and their family, because the infection doesn't stop at the wall when you leave. It's the risk of bringing it back, and I think that does show the altruistic nature of the human, right? Of course, we're worried about our own mortality, but I think there is this overriding sense coming out of people that no, I'm worried about my community, and I think there's cynicism about, does my employer care about the community the way I care about the community? And there's ethical companies that go out of their way to make that clear that they do, and there's those that are famously thought of as evil. At the end of the day, I think they're all made up of humans. We're all trying to do the best we can, right? I think very few actually have evil intent, but we can get pretty narrowly focused, right? And sometimes that leads us to doing things that we wouldn't feel good about. And harking back, if we had the information at our fingertips to make us aware of the things we're doing that we're not aware we're doing, maybe that would help us be a more complete human. Because just like your Intera version of the podcasts, I think perfecting ourselves as humans is the ultimate journey, right? It's what we all should be striving for, and I think data can help us do that too. But to bring it back to Microshare, it turns out that contact is important in managing disease, obviously, and it's probably the most obvious thing. But now that we learn more about how COVID-19 is contracted, right? How the SARS-CoV-2 virus spreads, we begin to realize that early on it was a frenzy over cleaning physical spaces, right? This idea of fomites, things that you might touch a doorknob or a table, and certainly there are some diseases that spread most effectively that way, and we're finding that it seems that COVID-19 is mostly transmissible through aerosol, right, through air. Mm. And as you think about, well, contact is one aspect, but what if you and I weren't in contact, but you coughed in a space 5 minutes ago and then left? And then I walk into that space. There's no contact between us. There's no bracelet or cell phone that will detect the correlation. But here I am breathing potentially infected air unknowingly. So again, the human network that we can detect with contact tracing is only one aspect. It gives you a blurry picture, better than no picture, but a blurry picture. But as you start feeding in occupancy data, right? So who is moving through what space? That gives you a little bit greater resolution. And then you add air quality to that. How much is my HVAC system turning over the air that I'm breathing? At what rate, right? Is it freshening it up every 5 minutes, or is it, lingering for 5 hours? That gives us an even greater resolution. And then layer on cleaning. How often and how effectively are my cleaning staff disinfecting areas where people are congregating or where they're transiting, right? It doesn't look like they're congregating, but they all pass through the same hallway or go through the same turnstile to get into work or out of work. When you really begin to layer in all these extra dimensions, you get a clearer and clearer picture of the aspects that make it more efficacious, right? To use this data to protect well-being. And again, one of the things I think that we ought to do with that is turn that around and put it right back in your hands. As a customer, as an employee, or as a visitor of an organization, I ought to be able to look at my trusty digital twin portal here, and it should tell me, what's the safety of my environment right now? Was there a group of 50 people here just 2 minutes before I arrived? Because I don't know that as a human, but with that complete picture of things, I can give people sort of immediate real-time feedback about, hey, you shouldn't go into this conference room. You should wait 5 minutes for the air to be cleaned. And I can know this by deploying these cheap sensors. It costs almost nothing to know this much about a building. I will tell you that you will be very hard pressed to find a business model that is more affordable than Microshares. and we've worked really hard to democratize this technology. I left Accenture to found Microshare. There's amazing things being done at that level, but companies are spending, multi-million, 50, $100 million for these projects, and getting remarkable stuff. But if we really want to drive innovation, we really want to impact people's lives, we've got to democratize these things. We've got to, package them better, deploy them more effectively, economically, scale them up. So that's been kind of part of our mission, is to make it so that people who don't want to spend $50 million on a high-end project to get this rocket science technology deployed. What if I have 50K a year? What if I got 100K a year? And I've got so it's these good enough technologies that we're figuring out how to weave them together to just radically improve the ability of the humans. And again, I think it's not the company's job to drive us to behave differently based on this. It's turning it around and putting it in your hands. The visual I have is Star Trek communicator, right? You walk into a room, you push the button, out goes the signal. And then from all these disparate signals, right, from other wireless sensors, from other users' feedback, from the temporal and spatial information from the digital twin of humans and spaces, should come back the information that says, Takatoshi, you're all set. You can have this business meeting and be comfortable. Or, you know what, good day to stay at home, maybe do this meeting by Zoom. And it's all in service of helping you protect your friends and family, right? So I got to say, it feels good. I mean, it's obvious that I think as an entrepreneur, you want to do well while doing good, and it just so happens, I think, that at this point in time, it's enabled us to do just that.
Yeah, and you're talking about these sensors that can actually potentially tell us that there might be contagious diseases in these meeting rooms in your office space. But when we talk about accuracy of exactly what do we actually see inside these rooms, so let's say we want to detect COVID-19 that's in the air. Is that sensor good enough to actually detect the COVID-19 there, or are we just actually looking at a guy or a person, or sorry, a girl, like coughing, and then assuming that they might be spreading a germ, right? And one of the things that I always feel about also is that when we actually can see this, vision that there's so many germs around us, it freaks us out at the same time, right? We don't want to see all these potential germs around us, and then it makes me not want to go into the office anymore. So what is the kind of balance that you have with your system? Because, you don't want to be overly sensitive, or you don't want people to be overly sensitive about going into the office and interacting with people.
That's right. This might be controversial, but what I find is that if you can watch the reaction of the females in an organization, you get a good read on whether you're doing a good job or a bad job at minimizing disgust. They seem, I think, evolutionarily wired to react strongly to things like insects and rodents as a conveyor of disease, I think is clear, right? And I think if you put, like you said, if you put too much power or too much detail, then everything is disgusting, and you'll either go through life completely unhappy, or it'll dull your senses, right? You'll be so used to being disgusted that it no longer means anything and doesn't mitigate your behavior. So how do you do that? I think there is no doubt that curation of information. I've said this now for 20 years is non-controversial, but probably for 30. That the 21st century skill set will be curation. It's if you can go to school and get a librarian's degree, I think you are going to be well suited to live in this world. Now, it's not because books still matter, physical paper books, but the notion about curating data is really this higher order idea, right? And it's kind of a combination. Data science, is that curation? Well, it's a little bit, it's the nerdy, technique-y, math kind of aspect of this, but the context of information and how you filter that information, how you present that information, ultimately, that's kind of what we're talking about. It's designing the human interface with that digital twin for a particular purpose, right? So what's cool about collecting a bunch of data is that it has multiple dimensions, like a twin of you or I. You can see us from multiple angles. I don't look very good from the front or the back, so it really doesn't matter. But um, the
Not at all.
the angle we present of the twin matters to how people might react, right? Um, and so I think there's an aspect of that. But you asked about sensors. The world of detailed chemistry, right, is really what specific tests for things like SARS-CoV-2 in water or air, or nasal discharge, really requires very specific chemistry, and the chemistry is one that inherently the reagents used to do these detections are used up in the detection process, right? So it's really, if you think about, it might be the disposable razor on your razor blade, right? You can shave a few times, but then you got to replace it. So it's possible that we might be able to deploy sensors that have the chemical reagents necessary to do live detections, but it would be certainly inconvenient. And it would probably be expensive because you'd have to change those reagents constantly. And so our focus has been on and I believe science, there was a fantastic company out of MIT that's doing something very similar with wastewater, and their core use case was live detection of the metabolites that humans produce in excretion. We'll just leave it at that. And they were using it to be able to predict opiate problems in a building in an area by looking for the metabolites of opium products, heroin, or et cetera, and using that to direct aid to those areas that might inexplicably have spikes in opioid problems. So that's an example of putting a sensor that has specific chemistry. But their model was, you'd collect wastewater for a week, and then you had to take that whole thing out, take it to the lab, swap everything out and put it back. And I think we'll go there, right? I think we'll get better and better at this. But if you look at an air quality sensor, that has no reagents in it. And it is available, I think, for about $4 a month through our model. You can put this in a conference room, or you can put 10 of them in an open space. And they use typically rare metals to detect the physical properties of clouded air, right? So what's clouded air? Well, it's stuff in the air that makes it, changes the metal conductivity, right? Conductivity. And this is something that doesn't need to be replaced. You stick it up once and it keeps on doing its thing. And so what we have tried to do is say, look, no, is that detecting COVID specifically? It's not. Maybe one day we'll be able to do that economically. Today we really can't, but can we put these economical sensors in place, those that are in the $50 range to manufacture and deploy, because we could put a lot of them out there. Can we put enough of these out there that the data, even though the sensors are relatively stupid, that the data still adds up to something that is more predictive? So it's really like one sensor is not going to do it, right, for $50. But if you put 10 up, now you start to get that picture clear enough that you can start making decisions. So the sensors really, it's like what it detects that's most important in this current time. I can't tell if COVID's in the air, but what I can tell is whether the room's HVAC systems or the windows are exchanging the air we're breathing. And if you watch one of these sensors, you can see if we are in a conference room with 30 people, you'll see clean, fresh air get polluted, with things like CO2 and human outgassing, you'll see it. And then when everybody leaves, and I can know when everybody leaves with the contact tracing or occupancy stuff, and then how quickly does the room respond back to that baseline of clean air? That tells you how quickly your HVAC system is working in that particular area. And some buildings have really remarkable HVAC systems with all this information coming together, and some buildings do not. In reality is we live in a massive variety of different spaces we occupy in. Some are hundreds of years old, right? And some are just built yesterday. What's cool about these is we can deploy these in new buildings and old buildings and sort of normalize the data we get from them. So you don't count on being the most efficient, brand new HVAC, smart building. That's great. If you got that, we can pull that data too. But when you deploy these sensors, it's cheap enough to put them everywhere and put them in the specific room, put them in the specific corner. We could give them to people so they can carry and put them on their own desks, right? It gets to the level economically where we can increase the resolution of that picture. So I think it gives us as good a view of practical wellness as actually detecting the virus, and that's our goal, right?
And do you think any element of this COVID-19 did really accelerate your business? Because, before this, detecting germs wasn't a huge focus, I presume, for most building managers and facility managers and such. And now this COVID-19 came in and all this spotlight on how to detect germs, how to purify air, where do we need to clean more, where should we do social distance people, all became a focal point on building managers. Can you highlight that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of these surprising things that happen as an entrepreneur, right? We're about 8 years old now, so we're not a young startup by any means. We've matured quite a lot and had our pivots in the past, right? Just like I think any startup will. 2020, I think, was set to be a breakout year for us prior to the quarantine and the impact on our lives. And it was in areas that are related to employee engagement and building efficiency. And, it might seem like relatively trivial concerns compared to where we're sitting today. And we had some very large orders that were pending coming into the year that we were celebrating. And then, the world got turned upside down. And the good thing about being a startup, and particularly having a platform that we've developed not to be a single sensor company, but to be implicitly about multiple sensors, different types, high scale. I think that's really our niche in the marketplace is scale both horizontally and vertically, large numbers of sensors and large variety of sensors. So that gave us the right jumping off point to be able to pivot into, okay, it's not about smart cleaning alone, at least anymore. I think it's still about smart cleaning because our cleaners in buildings are being asked to do more with less these days. It's not good enough to clean at night anymore the way most buildings get cleaned. You got to do it all the time. You got to be visible. You've got to be, so and very few people have gotten more money to do better cleaning. So there's a lot of stress in that space. So we are adding a lot of value there too, but it's really about that multi-dimensional picture. And so, yeah, we were able to bring to market the contact tracing capability, mix that in with the other dimensions I'm talking about, human feedback, air quality, standard occupancy, and the kind of holistic digital twin picture that we've been building. And adding contact tracing to that has given us a way. It's strange that to say, but I think 8 months later, we are one of the market leaders in contact tracing, which is a space that, there were people in before, but it was sort of a juiceless area to pursue. There wasn't a compelling event for contact tracing previous to this. So here we are finding ourselves being quite successful. We've deployed all over the world. We've got tens of thousands of souls being protected with our contact tracing. And that is growing quite rapidly. And of course, there's a strategic imperative that, yes, we need to, as the American expression at least goes, make hay while the sun is shining, right? So take advantage of the current moment to grow. But strategically, what happens on the positive side if we get, a good, widely deployed vaccine? Does contact tracing drop off? Probably does. I think it won't go to zero ever again because I think awareness of global pandemics, it's very much in the universal mind right now. So I think there will be changes that stick around, and I think Companies that care about their employees and want to retain good employees will want to maintain a readiness stance about how will I continue, so that the next time this happens, like you said, we don't have to resort to quarantine, right? And some of that's about readiness, right? We just weren't ready. So we had no choice but the lockdown. Next time, I hope, we'll be more ready, to deal with it. So I think it will stick around. But what I need to be able to do is show people that being data driven in the way they engage employees, in the way they engage customers, in using the built space most efficiently to do better business, that's a data driven problem at scale. And if you're a store owner with a 5,000 square foot store, you don't need my technology. It's not for you. You can walk around and look, and you know when the air is not being refreshed, and you know when it's not clean. But if you are trying to manage, 50, 100, 1,000 different workspaces, if you've got millions of square foot under control, there's no way your human mind is going to be able to do that. You can't manage by walking around anymore. And I think our working world is just going to split even more. It's going to exacerbate this problem because people aren't going to want to concentrate anymore. The corporate campus turns out to be a petri dish. And I think we're aware of that now. So people are going to want to split up. We're still going to want to work together, right? I think though everybody working from home is just not going to work over long term. But I also think working from home is a new normal. Right? We're going to balance regional areas where you and I might get together around a whiteboard, because I still don't find a good replacement for that experience, right, creatively. Um, but then we're going to go back to our home offices. Um, the people in manufacturing, there probably won't be one giant factory with one machine. They're going to have more than one factory floor with smaller machines and smaller clusters. And that'll take, I think, 5 to 10 years to evolve from where we are today. But that's the direction that you can clearly see the commercial real estate space heading. Um, and I need to be able to support that, because it's the data, it's the human behavior, it's the resource availability, it's the ongoing engagement with human wellness that makes you successful at that in the long term. And it's a data problem, man. And that can make your life better. It can make the company's bottom line better. It will improve the environment by making better use of space, because we're not creating more space, in the world, right? And better use of the resources of those space, right? Less waste, more impact on human well-being. So to me, there is this long-term vision that we need to be able to move people from, yes, this is an evolutionary process for you. It's a 12-step program, right? You're in step one here. You're scared. You need to survive. You need to, figure out if your business is going to make it through this. But you're still really worried about infecting your friends and family. But, we can help you with that. But that's only the first step, man. We've got to move through all these various emotional and organizational change steps to the vision of, just employee wellness engagement is in the mix. Our physical environments are reactive to us. They're optimized for resource use and human well-being. And that's the end game, right? And I see us on that journey, and COVID has accelerated us, I think, into that space. It gives us the opportunity to have conversations with people who probably wouldn't be thinking about this for another 10 or 20 years even. But, so for us, it's been a positive step for our business. I think we were at the right place at the right time. I don't claim to be prescient in any way in this way. It caught me as flat-footed as anybody else. But again, the power of data and the power of a startup, frankly, to pivot quickly enough to address a real market need that came out of nowhere. I think, that just so happens to be who we are, what we are, and it's it's somewhat humbling and gratifying to be where we are today.
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like people are very quick to forget about a lot of things. So, pandemics, you have this, and then maybe a year or so later, people start forgetting. But I think the technology there that you left behind, and the concept behind being able to manage the well-being of employees hopefully would stick, because that is something that a lot of corporations haven't really focused on, in my view, or at least from my experience. I haven't seen that many companies focus on that. So at least from the physical well-being, we can start from helping companies with that, to help their employees be more loyal to their companies or being happy to be working in a certain space. As even though we are probably going to be shedding more, employees from companies going forward, but the only way you can really obtain or retain talent is by thinking about more about them. So I think there's a lot of requirements from companies that is not just about the bottom line, but a lot of things that will be demanded from the employees by as well. So,
I think the sustainability movement, Takatoshi, is has been growing, right? It's smaller than it probably will be, but ESG is something that a lot of investors are talking about, a lot of companies are embracing, and it may be at the moment cynically embracing. It's sort of hard to know, but I do think there's a continuation of that, and I think it's a generational wave of younger people caring more and more disproportionately about their role in the environment. And I think of all the things going on in the world, that's probably the best thing that I see happening, right? Is people being more aware. Now, are they overreacting in some cases? Yes, because we all still have monkey minds, right? But at least we might be focusing on something that has a long-term benefit to society, I hope. And again, I think data would help that. So imagine having a fluid marketplace of information where a third party could come in and give a company, give a building, give a region a data-based score about sustainability and wellness. And let's say, Austin, Texas, Singapore, Frankfurt, Germany, right? These are regions that have highest scores on the balance between employee wellness and ESG. I think that 10 years from now, this will be the kind of it'll be the credit score equivalent of how would I choose to work for company A or company B. Well, this is one of the factors I might consider, right? What's their score? Are they good with the environment? Are they clear with their shareholders? Are they sustainable in their sourcing? Are they keeping an eye out for my well-being, for the family and friends' well-being? Even if I'm not super worried about that on a daily basis anymore, I think there will be that background kind of sensibility that will sustain, right? So if I could take that data and give you the tools, and then that would create an environment in which employers would want to begin to compete for employee wellness, for sustainability. And I think that is the way to leverage the capitalist system to do good in the world, is by making it visible, making it a buyer value, making it a product feature. And I think if you think through the endpoint of this, and everybody's adopted these kind of technologies, maybe there's a few laggards, but there'll be a great pressure for everybody to participate in such an ecosystem because they want to get a good score, and that people begin to value that. And when I buy an electronic, I want to know what the score of the company is. I want to know what the impact of this electronic is, and that's a holistic thing. And I think data would be the way to unlock this power of the watchdog. And again, being a libertarian, I don't really want government to play that role. I think it can be a non-governmental function, something closer to the free press. But however that unfolds, visibility on that data broadly will create these opportunities for organizations to respond to that cultural desire for greater sustainability, greater wellness, greater engagement with the community of their organizations, governments. And so I think although we will give up our own personal information, I think that we are also going to expect that our organizations begin to give up their information. And we get to know as much about them, or their digital twins, as they know about ours. And that's when, this starts to balance out, I think, in the end. Now, there's a lot of things that happen, right? And that probably sounds wildly optimistic, but I think we see, right, like the technology needs to support that. So that's been my mission. The culture needs to ask for it. So I think that's happening, but it's somewhat unpredictable. And then you do need to count on companies to find it in their incentive to close that gap. And things like COVID, there's a downside, but it also does accelerate in that direction of people realizing, well, shit, I really do need to care about my employees' wellness, because this has been that compelling event. I'm not going to show up to work. I'm not going to turn your crank. I'm not going to write your television shows. I'm not going to manufacture your vaccine, unless you can show me that you are thinking about my community. You're helping me be healthy and keep my friends and family healthy. Geez, I think it makes it a capitalist imperative now to accelerate that investment, to accelerate that thinking, and so I see that as a positive, right? Maybe the silver lining in that gray cloud.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, right now, I think we're, for the past many, many years, maybe a decade or so, we've been confronted with the fact that wage growth has been very limited, and there's nothing really to look forward to for a company unless there's something really, other than monetary incentive to work for a company, and maybe that is employee wellness or re-education for from the employer side, so that we can actually really want to work for certain companies. And I think that data give back, or the return, so that they can improve themselves, is definitely something that we definitely would like to see more from companies, for sure. And well, I think we could talk about this for many, many hours, and I really enjoyed our conversation. So, thank you very much for your time. And before we kind of leave you off, where can people understand about you and your company? How can they follow you?
Yeah, so you can find out about Microshare at our website, www.microshare.io. And I do have a Twitter. You can reach out to me at microshare_CTO.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time, and hope I can continue following your fantastic work. So.
This was a great conversation, Takatoshi. I hope you have me back.
Hi, this is your host Takatoshi Shibayama. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. Now, if you enjoyed or disliked this show, please let me know by writing in the comment section. The only way I can improve or add value to you is through your voices. If there are any topics that you would like me to pick up, please also let me know in the comments. I'd love to start chatting with you all. And if you would like to continue watching the show, please subscribe. Thank you.